All right, here he is.
Wait, what music do you like that you would think would surprise us?
Oh my God. Soft rock. I mean, I've listened to soft rock since I was a kid, and
Like who?
Giz and Carole King, uh, James Taylor, Neil Diamond. Uh,
Love.
I mean, I thought Kenny Rogers was regular. I didn't even know he was country. I didn't know that was country music. Um,
Love the Gambler.
Helen Reddy. Listen. Giz and I would get into arguments because he'd get in my car, in my Jetta, and I'd be playing Christopher Cross or some shit. And he'd be like,
Love.
what is this? You're hip hop. Stop listening to this. It's going to make you soft. You need to. Case in point, there's some of my songs I've even used a Dionne Warwick lyric and I think it's the same for KRS-One. Like,
Sure.
we'll take the wackest song and make it. He was using the Beatles and
Sure.
melodies from all types of genres. So yeah, that might surprise them.
Well, this is part of the beauty of hip hop that we can take anything and make it hip hop, be it rock or the Doobie Brothers or whatever. And if you sample it and loop it and do the right things to it, now it's hip hop. And we enjoy going back as listeners, going back and go, oh, listen to this jazz sample, this blues sample, this soft rock sample that she or he made into this beat, right? And like, I didn't even expect this super soft jazz record from 1953 to rock so hard if you took the right part and sampled it just properly and looped it up.
Right. No, it's interesting even now when you talk to today's listeners of hip hop and you say, oh, but that came from, a record that was just out in the 90s. Or you're explaining something, from the whole bad boy life, and that was out in the 80s. You can tag it back to something and it just opens up their eyes. It's beautiful to be able to teach things of that nature.
I do feel old listening to modern hip hop when I'm like, oh, you're taking off of NWA. Are you pulled off of that thing that I listened to in the 90s? And they think it's new and fresh. And I'm like, no, you're just, so now we're the old heads of like, that's just the Supreme, right? Our parents were like, that's not new. And now we're like, that's not new.
No, not whatsoever. But it's still fun for me. Excuse me. And I guess depending on how you impart that knowledge, like,
Sure.
oh, did you know? You got to be diplomatic. Did you know that kick right there comes from Tribe Called Quest, and Tribe Called Quest got it from there? And, they're more apt to listen depending on delivery.
My kids like Jaden Smith.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of knew that his dad was an actor, but weren't really checking for him. He was an MC. And they're like, oh, really? And I played Parents Who Don't Understand. We got through about 2 verses, and they're like, this song is stupid. Can we go back to Jaden? Like, come on. Like, that was cute. Like, let's go back.
They don't get it.
But do you still love hip hop, like modern hip hop? Do you feel as connected to it as you did, like 80s, 90s I'm sure you were a huge fan as well as a creator. I feel like a lot of the modern stuff feels disconnected to me versus the stuff that I loved.
Well, as a DJ, I've learned to find something to like about a lot of music. Because, if I'm going to play and be current, then I've got to be able to connect with something about the song. Because to play a song I'm not connected with, people will know. I won't even know what to mix that thing with. It's like, it's just this anomaly standing out on its own. But I find a lot of the music out that there are special things about it, just as in yesteryear. Did I love every hip hop song that came out in the late
No.
80s and 90s? No. But there were songs that stuck out. There was
Yeah.
something about that song that made it, like Jaquan, one, in comes the two to the three. And, yeah, he took that from the doc, right? Funky enough. We're getting funky. But he still did it in a way that made it really interesting to me. Just as in, I talk about Megan's Plan B. That sounds like hip hop to me. She's putting a dude in order. She checking them and she's sliding over that beat. She's using a voice that I don't know that I've heard from her on every song. So
Mm.
she kind of like channeled into some real like authentic, what I call street kind of hip hop. But yeah, I get into the music. I get into Lil Baby. I
Me
got
too.
into Suge, which was, the baby song. That voice. I can get into Rick Ross. I could get into Drake and Meek Mill, and um, I'm still a fan of hip hop. I pick and choose what I really am drawn to, with a different kind of ear, but it's
Yeah.
still some solid stuff out there to
I
listen.
like a lot of those artists you mentioned, and there's definitely Drake songs and Ross songs that I like. I do feel like the generation that we come from, 80s, 90s, there was much more of a focus on lyrics and verses and making your verses great. And I feel like modern, the attention to verses and lyrics and double entendres and word choice and these sort of MC things
Mhm.
is lesser, right? And I feel like before 2000, the music was more dense with words,
Mhm.
and now there's more space, so, which is why they do so many ad libs, because there's so much space. You know what I mean?
You know
In the song.
what's so funny about that is I remember writing my first rhyme for Cold Rock a Party, and Mace was there. And he was sitting in the back of the room, and he was like that line that you're saying right there, let it breathe after that. Come in after the beat drops. Let that breathe right there. And I said, oh, okay. And it was a whole new way of looking at delivery for me. And then I had a real interesting conversation with Nelly. And he was like, Lyte, when I lived in New York, I understand why you all rap like that. It's because that's the way life is. It's constantly
Mm.
happening. And he said, us outside of New York, we're driving at a very early age. We're not on the train. We're driving, we're rolling. So we make music to ride to in our cars, which doesn't
Mm.
call for that back to back to back to back to back. Like you take a Buster, versus a rapper today, like he's getting a mile a minute in, whereas they're like, just rolling over the beat. I think it's all a matter of preference. I still don't think that's an excuse to say nothing. You can find something to say.
I
And
think that's a really interesting and important point, that there is a freneticness to New York, and especially in the 80s and 90s, that was reflected in the music that made people want to rap quickly. And life in the South, and in definitely in the South and the Midwest,
mm-hmm.
proceeds at a slower pace. It's more cars versus subways and walking. Um,
Yeah, and
so
it's like, what are
there,
you making the music for? You
yeah.
know, some people put when we were making music, when we went in that studio, we just did it. We didn't say this is for the club, this is for radio. There wasn't this delineation as to where this music could go. We just made it because we loved it. And as a matter of fact, though that music wasn't even EQ'd for the club. Like if you
Mm.
hear stuff that's played right behind something that came in the late 90s, the whole system technologically as to how they mixed a record is completely different, mixed and mastered. And it sounds like, 1,000 times better than what we did, perhaps back in the 80s. But the truth is now they're making music for a reason. So with Nelly, it was like we're making music for people to roll to in their cars. Whereas in New York, it became we're making music for the club, or we're making music for Funk Master Flex so that he could throw bombs all over. So it has to be big. And now a lot of music to me, it sounds like a horror film. Like it sounds so mean and angry. The production of it, it just sounds like battlefield music.